If you caught the previous episode of Modern Greaser, you saw that I swapped out my welded diff rear end for an open rear end I got for free. After driving on the new diff for a few weeks, I built bedsides for my truck out of scrap wood and slammed it to the ground with a ton of logs, and even fatter logs. This heavy load revealed that the panhard bar still needed further adjustment as my tires were rubbing the inner fender wells. I fixed the alignment and decided that while a ton of logs loomed over my head as the truck was sitting in the slanted driveway while supported by one of the finest quality of Harbor Freight jacks and jack stands, that it was time to check the differential fluid, to which was non-existent. No differential fluid. Just water, gunk, dirt. It was basically mud. It was disgusting. And there wasn't even enough water in there to lubricate the thing. It was a shame. I literally had this thing on the highway the day before. A fast cleanup and some new gear lube before I quickly discovered why the rear end was empty and full of water in the first place. The pinhole in the rear diff cover, which was actually rusted through. The truck was loaded with what I soon discovered to be termite-infested wood as the swarmers were finding their way through the cracks of the windows at our house. I had to get the wood out of here. So out of time, I quickly patched the pinhole by gooping on the right stuff by Permatex, and bam, no more leak. A little painter's tape for safe measures, and I was back in business. It should hold for 20 miles, right? Well, it did, without a problem. However, the axle bearings could not handle the heavy load, and they basically imploded into the differential housing. The heavy load pinned the axles to the housing after it destroyed the bearing, creating what we know as friction. She started smoking bad, and I had to stop and borrow a hose from a stranger house, and it basically just vaporized the water as I was spraying it on there. It was scary hot. Luckily for me, the super hot rim combo was on the same tire that was pumped up with air using the super sketchy GTO cylinder gas pump to fill it, which probably contains a little bit of vaporized gasoline if I could imagine. Not giving into a tow truck, I limped the thing home 5 miles at a time before stopping, pulling over, dumping water on it, letting it sit a while, then followed by limping it another 5 miles home. So I pulled my new-to-me rear end out of the truck, took the old welded diff rear end, and before stuffing that old rear end that I thought was bad because I didn't want to deal with the inner housing, I pulled it all apart. I pulled the welding diff carrier out of that rear end, realized that all the spider gears were welded to the carrier itself. So there was not going to be the easy swap of swapping out the spider gears. That is welded so tight and well, which is what I was afraid of. And that is a ton of work. I was hoping to break these welds off, but that's some pretty serious welding. So really all I can do is take this gear from this rear end and put it into the housing from the other rear end and switch it in here. The problem is the bearings and the races and everything's really set up for that, not this. So on our spare rear end, I took out this center section here that has the spider gears that actually turn. This one is so welded, there's no way of getting this out. So I'm actually going to pull these off. You need to mark them on either side, which ones that they are. I'm assuming these bearings are bad, so these bearings are going to have to come off. New bearings and races, and hopefully be able to put this gear onto this section, stick it back in here with some new bearings, and call it good. As you can see, my area is very clean. So I had to take the carrier out of the rear end that was in the truck that I got for free. I took that carrier, took the ring gear off. I then took the carrier out of the welded diff, which has the spider gears all welded to it, and I removed the ring gear, which was in good shape off of that. I took that ring gear and mounted it to the diff that basically imploded with the logs. I put that carrier with the shims that were used in the welded diff, so all my shims would line up with the same ring gear. After mounting the ring gear in the new carrier setup, I was able to install the spider gears like they're supposed to, and voila, I had my open rear diff as I wanted. This is what I should have done in the first place instead of swapping over all the brakes and swapping over all the lines and doing all this terrible stuff. But I was a little bit afraid of messing with the differential. I don't have the right tools to mess with the rear differential, and also you have to be one hell of a mechanic to know all the different ins and outs of differentials. They're a totally different animal than a lot of the other parts in your cars. So this experience gave me more confidence to be able to swap out the rear end than the GTO. The GTO actually has a 273 posi rear end, and it really needs a 373 posi rear end. Now the car did have the original rear end set up on it, but when it went under the restoration, the donor frame that went onto the car, because it's a whole different frame, actually had a better rear end. So it's still a GM 12 bolt, so I need to pull that out and swap in a gear setup. So this is what we swapped out. This whole section is welded up. There's no way of getting those spider gears out of there. So that's a GM20 in the truck. This is a GM50, so they're a little different part numbers. Everything really seemed to match up pretty good. Worst case scenario, if it's not working or if it's humming, it's making noise, I put this back in. But at that point, I'm probably just gonna order posi like a man. The rear drums in the truck actually could benefit from having a redo, but why spend $150 going through and redoing all the drum brakes when you can buy a whole disc conversion for $300? So my wallet says no, but the brakes say yes. That needs to be done sometime in the future. So lesson learned, sometimes free parts are good if you have nothing, but parts from another donor vehicle can be another can of worms in themselves. I should have swapped carriers in the first place, but rear diffs are just totally different. Thank you for joining us on yet another episode of Modern Greaser. Make sure you click that like button if you like this video. Make sure you click that like button if you hated this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. So on this differential, we have our spider gears. Now I'm assuming that these are welded together in the other rear end, hopefully not welded to this casing. If they are, that would be bad, but that's probably likely the case.